Hello, good evening. Thank you all for coming. I am Whaley from Sabio, as Simon pointed out, and I'm going to talk a bit about voice interfaces to the connected devices, which, as you probably all are now aware, is a huge topic of great interest, particularly after CES at the back end of last year, and everybody is now talking about how we can talk to, converse with the coffee pot and talk to the TV and stuff like that. So we'll try and deal with some of that. First of all, I'm going to introduce Sabio. So we've got some funky slides around that. We are a customer service systems integrator, really. So customer experience systems integrator. What does that mean? So we take lots of different customer experience technologies and we bring them together and we add consultancy, design, software development skills to do that, to build customer experience solutions for our customers. A lot of that is around the contact center, so traditional customer contact. How do enterprises talk to their customers through the contact center? But increasingly, that's about the digital world and how we start to have conversations with people on the web, on social media, on kind of messaging channels, and how we provide automation to let them scale and deal with those kind of things. We think customer experience should be brilliant, and we try and help our customers to deliver brilliant customer experiences to their customers. So how do we do that? So we are very much a user-centered design style organisation, and we do that by thinking about who your customers are and how we can build great things for them. And every time somebody contacts one of our clients, that she's going on a journey, and she's doing things with either the phone or with the internet and trying to find out information, and then often is struggling or having to repeat and relay information twice or more times. So we want to make those journeys better. And now you guys are probably sitting here thinking, I didn't know there was a guy from marketing coming up to talk to me about customer service, right? It was all more around voice and the IoT. Well, let me hopefully just set that a little bit off edge a little bit and talk about me just briefly. So I have been involved in AI and cognitive science and things like that long before these were trendy topics, so over 10 years ago. And then I've been working as a software designer and a voice user interface designer, speech scientist, UX consultant, these type of things. So hopefully that gives you a bit of kind of belief in me as my ability to talk to some of these things and not just as a kind of marketing person. And then recently I'm looking after the kind of digital portfolio for Sabio, so all of things around speech and IVR, natural language, AI, biometrics, and things like that, how it all fits together. But also there's a huge question that we're trying to address with our customers around how does the enterprise deal with the Internet of Things? How does it start to use all of the new devices, as contact channels, but also the data that they provide and how we integrate that all together? And what does that look like going forward? And how do we scale across these enormous growth areas? So let's start with voice interfaces. So most of you probably used a speech recognition system, and actually if I talked to you a year ago, probably fewer of you had, but now with Alexa, you've probably all spoken to speech recognition in some description fairly recently. And actually speech has been around for a long time. We've been talking to computers for maybe 30, 40 years in a kind of reasonable way, but more slowly, but more basically before that. But there's some big things that have happened in the last few years that have made some changes. And some of that has been around technology. So as you're probably aware, things like deep learning and recurrent neural nets have come along, and they've really improved the power of speech technology as a process. GPUs and low precision processors have come along that allow us to actually scale the neural networks and deep learning part of that in the cloud and deliver it. And fast always-on data connections have meant that you can start to use those services from your devices everywhere without struggling and latency and all these things that we can't really tolerate in this domain. And then exposure around things like Google Now, Cortana, dictation systems, IVR, call center. Everybody's starting to use speech much more, and that's growing. And then finally, Alexa came along, Google Home came along, and that exposure is just growing. And that's really leading to acceptance. And this is growing all the time. So the latest figure from Apple is 2 billion requests to Siri per week, 20-25% of Google searches by voice, and up to around 8-9 million Alexa units, which if you think that actually Alexa's only been around for 3 years, that's an enormous number. So that means speech is around and people are starting to use it, they're accepting it, and it's becoming more and more part of everyday lives. And as I said before, if you were at CES or saw any of the videos, CES, the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, everything was, Alexa just kind of tore the show apart, and we've got all kinds of ridiculous things going on with speech that you wouldn't have imagined a couple of years ago. So what is going on with speech? What can we really achieve? Well, hopefully, I'm going to dumb this down a bit, and apologies if you're an expert in the field, but speech recognition really is kind of a 4-stage thing. So we start with kind of acoustic matching, so we take an audio signal and we've got to break that down into kind of an audio analog signal into a digital signal, so we can understand, the computer can understand it, and then break it up into little bits, sort of kind of sounds. Then we've got to glue those sounds together, and then we've got to glue the words into more kind of larger phrases and sentences using the language model and the language parsing. And once we understand what the words and phrases are, we've got to be able to do semantic labeling. So we've got to say, based on what these words are, roughly what does this mean in this context. Finally, we've got to do some contextual understanding. And in terms of what we can do, the things around this part, the kind of core speech bit, are getting really pretty good now. And Microsoft and Google and Nuance are kind of quoting parity with human transcription on database, on corpora as they call it, that are specific to the switchboard corpus and things like that, these things. So it's getting really good. Semantic labeling is getting pretty accurate as well on a specific data set, and things like Alexa are driven by taking groups of utterances, so labeled transcribed speech, and saying actually, or untranscribed, just examples of what people say, and saying this means that and this means this, and over time it starts to learn and understand. And then finally, contextual understanding, we don't really we're not very good at that yet, and that is a huge growth area. But actually, if you think about this is really getting pretty close to something that looks a lot like kind of general artificial intelligence, which is, if you're familiar with the Turing test, if you can start to do real contextual understanding and answer those questions, you're probably achieving pretty close to general AI. So anybody who's passed the Turing test, welcome to put up your hand. Command and control, so what can we do? So command and control, yeah, we've been able to do that for a long time. Search, yeah, absolutely, we can do that. We've been able to do that for quite some time, and if you ever use Google, etc., you'll find that works pretty well. Structured dialogue, again, yeah, we do that pretty well, and we've actually been doing that for years on the phone channels. So we've ever spoken to speech recognition on the phone, if you bank, etc. Structured dialogue works very well. And then full conversation is pretty much a no-no at the moment, so we don't really have that. Although we can kind of fake it and make it look a lot like that using structured dialogue, but we're really not there, and the context isn't there yet. So context is really the next battleground and is key to what we do next. And that's actually some of the interesting things about the Internet of Things, is it starts to provide data which is context. So conversation is a really interesting interface because we are completely wired for it, and we have developed to understand language from a very young age, and our evolutionary background makes us this way. And if you watch, if you've got kids, my little boy learning to speak, he's amazing at it. It just blows me away how well he learns to speak and how many years it's taken us to get computers to not do a particularly good job of it. We're just so good at it. But what we do is also learn social norms around dialogue, and we interpret what people say and the way they say them in terms of social norms. And what that means is that voice as an interface is quite different from normal graphical interfaces, because it actually can be quite offensive as an interface. So whereas you think the GUI's just made a mistake or it's an error or whatever, a conversational voice interface, it's being rude, and it's interpreted like that. So we need to be very careful when we're designing things, particularly things that come into our homes that we speak to, that we understand that actually voice is a very different interface, and that you can actually offend people quite quickly. And they're very intolerant of error in speech, whereas they are in other mediums. And my view is that consumers are not really going to be up for another really poor experience with speech. I've been working in speech for a long time, and every year speech is the next big thing, it's just around the corner, it's going to happen, and it never does. But I think we're getting closer to where speech is becoming accepted by everybody and used a lot. But if we screw up the interface again, and we upset everybody again, and we overhype what we can do, I think they're not going to tolerate it, they're going to stop using it, it's going to be a fad. So this isn't a talk about user experience and voice, but UX for me really is king, and it's about understanding an appropriate domain, building well-structured dialogue, and getting the right persona for your voice interfaces for whatever you're designing for, whether that be a kind of IVR phone system or control system for the smart home or the car or whatever it is. These three things are really important. So let's, look a little bit about connected devices and where this all sits. So it's a really interesting area, right? The connected world, and the growth predictions are enormous. Gartner predicts by 2020 there'll be 6.4 billion connected devices. 28% of UK homes have a smart TV. PwC predicts growth in the connected car revenues to be enormous and huge. But actually, at the moment, they haven't hugely taken off. And perhaps that's just the beginning of an exponential curve, right? So if you look at technology growth, and you read what Ray Kurzweil says, it bumps along very, very slowly as exponential curves do, and then suddenly blows up. So maybe smart homes, maybe the connected devices are going to do that, but they haven't quite done it yet. But there's a huge amount of interest in all of these areas. And the three areas that I'm going to look at, particularly related to voice, are wearables, or the connected you, the connected car, and the connected home. So the connected home. So actually, doing some research on this, I've discovered that the first smart fridge was built in 2001, right? but only 2% of smart homes have a smart appliance in the recent survey by Deloitte. So really small numbers of people actually have these things in their homes, even though there's an enormous amount of hype. 3% have a smart thermostat, although we see those adverts on telly all the time. We hear people talking about Nest and the rest of it, but still really small numbers. And my favourite is the connected toothbrush, right? Who needs a connected toothbrush? What does that actually do for us? But you can buy like 4 or 5 models on Amazon of connected toothbrushes. But this is an enormous growth area, and I think that actually the issue has been the so what about this. So why would I want to have connected things in my home? And I think as we have more connected devices, if we can glue them together, we can build better interfaces for them, they'll actually mean something in our lives, and they will actually start to take off. And speech is an area where there is an enormous amount of growth. So if you've got an Alexa and you look at the skills, there's 18 skills for smart home. At the moment, they're mostly switching off the lights, which is not hugely exciting in terms of what you can do, but they're getting there. LG allows you to order an Uber from its fridge. I don't know why, but see, when you plug Alexa in, it does all the things that Alexa does, and therefore you can order an Uber from the fridge. And Google Home is coming, and lots and lots of actions on there. And there's just an enormous amount. I was watching video after video on YouTube today around what's coming out of CES and Alexa and these type of things. What's interesting is how it's designed around specific instances of this thing, and there's no connectivity yet, and it's not really getting there. But we're seeing some real interest in growth. Connected cars, I think, are a really interesting area, and I think it's going to be one of the bigger growth areas for me, actually. And I think some of it is driven by this legislation, the eCall legislation. So you may be familiar with this, but all new cars in the EU by 2018 need to have this thing called eCall. So if there is an accident, it will call itself. It will call the emergency service providers that send data about what's happened in the car, so that what the speed of impact, where they are, etc., to aid the emergency services coming down. So that's driving connectivity in the car, with the ability for those sensors that are already in the car to be connected to something when they're connected to the wider internet or Sigfox or whatever. Obviously, the auto cars are a huge area as well. 2016, mid-2016, 140 million miles driven by Tesla and autopilot. This is just going to happen more and more and more. We're going to see more and more autonomous, semi-autonomous cars and these interfaces coming through. And Apple and Android have been, Google have been on this for ages, and since 2014, they've been had their kind of car operating systems. And speech again is becoming a major area in this and has been for a while. And I'm sure you've all had really frustrating experiences talking to your cars in the early days of speech. But this is beginning to change. Ford and VW introduced Alexa into their cars just this month, I think, or at the end of 2016. Microsoft's doing some really interesting stuff around specific noise modeling for cars. So at the moment you get lots of background noise up to speech recognition, but Microsoft are trying to change that, and I think Nuance are doing that too. And Nuance win BMW's Innovation Award for 2016, which, considering how long they've probably been working together, is quite an interesting concept. So another area where speech really lends itself to connected devices. Hands are clearly occupied, there's no clear screen, so it's a great area to do these things. And then finally, the connected U is also a really interesting area for beginning to introduce speech. So again, small devices and no screen, very obvious place to use speech, and lots of interesting types of applications. But again, a really small area. So really small. The Deloitte Smart Devices survey, or mobile survey, only 4% of us have a smartwatch. 9% have a fitness band, so really not much penetration into the UK market yet, but potentially growing. And the proliferation of the types of sensor are growing enormously. So this one was a posture sensor, so you put it on your coat, tells you off if you sit badly. You get lots of medical applications that are monitoring how, beginning to monitor your things like blood glucose and all kinds of things just being strapped around your leg or your arm. So lots of interesting data coming out of these things, and potential for integrating into a wider realm. And as I said, ideal place for voice interfaces. And again, Alexa comes up again. So Fitbit have introduced an Alexa skill. You can come home and you can say, Alexa, how am I doing today? And she tells you off for not doing enough paces or whatever, or getting your heart rate up or whatever it is that these things do. And what all of this stuff is doing that's really interesting is it's starting to provide loads of data, which is fairly obvious, right? So there's a huge amount of data that comes out of connected devices around the home, in the car, and around wearables that wasn't accessible before. But what do we do with it all, and where does it all live, right? So for the enterprise and for people who are trying to build these as kind of customer service channels or features or solutions, how do you deal with all this data, and what are we going to do with it? Where does it sit? Who looks after it? And all of those questions around security are kind of key here, but very interesting. So one of the ways that we talk to a lot of customers about is, okay, how are we going to scale to deliver these voice solutions to connected devices, and start to deal with the data and stick it all together and allow consumers to talk to their IoT devices, but make sense of it in the wider enterprise realm, and then use use the data to improve the experience as well. And what we find is that looks at the moment like having an intelligent assistant platform. So an intelligent assistant platform is kind of like a kind of chatbot or a conversational interface that you can scale. I hate chatbot as a term, but that kind of idea that you can scale over multiple channels and can also integrate into multiple data sources. And if you think about how people are using these things, there is an enormous amount of data that is generated, and there is very disparate interfaces. And at the moment, you kind of have people developing single interfaces to, an Alexa skill for Fitbit or an Alexa skill for Ford or whatever, but they don't really talk to each other. And if you own a number of these contact channels, so for example, if you're the Pru and you have this kind of new Vitality product, and you offer a deal on the Apple Watch, right? So which I got with this deal, right? And what happens is, if I pay a small amount of money at the beginning, and then if I walk enough, then I don't have to pay for the watch, basically. So if I do enough paces, I don't have to pay for the watch. So it's generating data, it's going into the contact center, it's going into the enterprise domain, and they have to deal with that and deal with me. And it stopped working, right? So it stopped talking to the app. So I'm getting a bit annoyed here because I'm going to have to start paying for this thing if this doesn't happen. So I've already created another reason for contact for the enterprise, which they don't particularly like, right? And I had to go, and eventually I got it resolved through Twitter. That was the only way that I could actually get hold of them and contact them. And I had to get a real live person to come and help me with this problem that they created for themselves. And they haven't automated, it's not brought together or anything like that, right? Imagine if they're in the app on my phone, or even on the watch itself, they had integrated an intelligent assistant, and I could just have a conversation with it, and it could have said, actually it was some silly setting that they'd set wrong in the device. It would have been easy thing to automate. They could have had that conversation with me and solved that problem. So these are one of the ways that we see that this kind of coming together in kind of this idea of a conversational middleware. So if you ever spend much time in many of our larger organisations around the UK, they have a number of legacy back-end systems and processes that aren't quite, up to scratch and brilliant. And that means that dealing with consumers at the front end is actually quite hard because they have to kind of knit all this stuff together. And it's quite expensive in terms of how you deliver that. If you can start to automate that, and then you can bring in things like the data that comes out of the connected devices, and you also use them as a contact channel, all the new contact channels around social media, and also the traditional contact channels, and blend that with your enterprise data that you've got sitting over here, and then all this new data and services in the cloud, and use something like this to be able to have smart conversations with consumers wherever they come from, wherever the conversation comes from, and optimize the responses to each one of those channels. You start to be able to solve some of those old challenges around data, but also integrate some of these new platforms and channels and build interfaces that will work for that are aware of who the consumer is and how it's interacting with their devices and the services they're offering, and provide much better customer services. And we get into this kind of idea of the AI virtuous circle, machine learning versus, I kind of like to stay away from the term AI, but the AI virtuous circle, where we use these devices all the time, and we're starting to generate data from using them and being around them and being, interacting with them. And then we talk to them, and we tell them what we want, and we generate more data in that way. And that just provides more and more learning capability to the algorithms. And this becomes more and more improved and more personal, and experience is just improved across these and more optimal. So how do we get there? How do we make all of this work? This sounds great, right? We really want to have a world where, well, maybe you don't want to talk to devices that are too smart and know about all your data, but if we can have a world where we can talk to our Internet of Things devices, and then we can swap onto the phone channel and talk to a computer there, and then swap back to Facebook Messenger and talk there, and it knows all about what we've been doing and can give sensible answers to our questions and not make us start all over again. And, how do we get there? So the first thing I think we need to do is start to work towards some open standards in this area, which is really new and there isn't any at all. So Google Home is quite different from Alexa, which is different from things like Nuance Mix or Amazon Alexa. All these things don't talk to each other. And there is the beginnings of this in a working group in the community group for the W3C. Which can eventually, I'm told, turn into a working group, and then we start to build standards out of some of this stuff. I think that's really important to kind of take us towards the future and what happens next. I think the first thing we need to do is kind of make things a lot less clunky in the future. So at the moment you specifically talk to each one of these devices, and particularly with Alexa you have to say stuff if you ask Alexa to ask Ford what the tyre pressure is in my car, and these kind of weird wake-up words and stuff is quite clunky and hard to do. And again, with Siri as well on the smartwatches, it's kind of clunky. And we just really want to walk into a space and say something and let the systems work out which particular device we were talking to and what it is you want it to do without particularly having to address it. The other thing that we need to deal with is the identity and personalization piece, which is around, how do we work out who's talking to us so we can personalize the responses, but also how do we make it secure? And I think this is coming really soon, is adding biometrics into these personal virtual assistants, intelligent assistants. We see that with Nuance added biometrics into their intelligent platform. It's called Nuance ID, and that will start to solve this problem to some extent. Amazon, obviously, you might have seen, had this problem where the newscasters were ordering stuff from Amazon via Alexa. Yeah, so if you add biometric detection in there, and then that problem goes away, right? So I think that's coming next. And then that kind of gets us to a kind of change potentially in the service paradigm. So at the moment it's a very reactive service, so whenever we want to talk to one of these devices or to one of the institutions or enterprises that deliver services on them, we have to go find them and ask them questions. But actually, imagine that I'm coming home in my connected car and it knows that I've come home and I'm wearing a smart device and it's been monitoring my heart rate and potentially my skin temperature I get back and I start to talk, and the house says, "Oh, welcome home," and then it knows who I am, so it says, "Welcome home, Dan. And by the way, I see that your heart rate's up a little bit, and your temperature's a little bit inflated. Maybe if I'm one of these more nervous people, it's going to offer to book me a doctor's appointment, because that's what I normally do in those circumstances. Or perhaps I'm a bit more of a hippie, and it's going to brew me a cup of echinacea tea, or whatever it is that we do." And start to be really proactive in our service. And then perhaps the home has got a leak detector on the pipe, so a connected leak detector. So home serve make this thing called LeakBot that does this already. And it says, "Oh, and by the way, you've got a leak on the pipes, and I've arranged a plumber to be in next week on Tuesday. Is that right? Yeah, fine, absolutely. I'll text them the one-time entry code, and they'll be able to get in, no problem." And it changes the service dynamic completely. And actually, this looks like a long way away, and probably starts to look like AI quite a lot. Well, even if it's not AI, it's quite good personalized intelligence and service to customers around these devices. And actually, I think we're probably going to start to see this future reasonably soon. And that's it.
Excellent.